Hey, I'm some nobody, and just like every other nobody on this platform, everything that comes out of my mouth is the dumbest thing you've ever heard another human being say. So I figured it was time to share my unasked for opinion on one of the most beloved characters of all time, the Spider-Man. Everybody young and old loves this arachnid fella. Me personally,
he stinks, and I don't like him.
nah, honestly, I'm with the popular crowd on this one. I love Spider-Man. This dude has been an integral part of people's childhood since the 60s. I don't have to explain why the guy with the cool design and the funny personality is popular. And despite being the media juggernaut that he is, I always felt like Spider-Man fans were mostly on the same page. Now don't get me wrong, Spider-Man fans argue a lot about a lot of different things. We're a fandom, of course we argue about the dumbest, most insignificant shit that makes other people outside the fandom point at us and laugh. But Spider-Man fans are unique, especially among comic book fandoms, because most Spider-Man fans will agree that pretty much all of his comics for the last 20 years have been totally unreadable. And that in the last few years they've gone from unreadable to straight up torturous.
He stinks and I don't like him.
I hope everybody's been enjoying Ultimate Spider-Man. It's been very good up until this point, but just know, main Marvel editorial is gonna get their hands on him eventually, probably for some Spider-Verse event, and he is going to die the most gruesome, tasteless death of all time that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths for years to come. Point I'm making is that Spider-Man fans are more united than most fandoms simply for the fact that Marvel hates Spider-Man. But there is one opinion on Spider-Man that will always be guaranteed to start an argument, and it happens to be an opinion that I share. I think Spider-Man should have organic webbing rather than using web shooters and web fluid.
He stinks and I don't like him.
Now, I already know what the immediate response to that opinion is. Oh, this guy is just another blinded by nostalgia Toby fanboy who has only ever interacted with the least comic book accurate adaptation of the character but still thinks he's an authority on what Spider-Man should be. Part 1 of my response to that is I can assure you this has nothing to do with Tobey Maguire. I love the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies because they're all fantastically made, but I fully acknowledge they are not the definitive Spider-Man, and people thinking it's the definitive Spider-Man have actually done more harm than good to the character over the past 2 decades. And as a quick sidebar, I think it's a little unfair to compare the other 2 live-action Spider-Man franchises to Sam Raimi's, because those movies aren't allowed to just be Spider-Man movies. Andrew Garfield's movies were meant to be a kickoff for Sony's own cinematic universe, and Tom Holland's movies are part of the whole MCU. So regardless of the actual artistic vision behind the films, the studios got their grubby hands all over it, and as we saw, the worst of Sam Raimi's trilogy is the worst because the studio put their grubby hands all over it. Sorry, I'm going off topic. Like I said, my reasoning has nothing to do with Tobey Maguire. It's way pettier than that. Oh, and part 2 of my response to your initial comment is fuck you, man. The words I put in your mouth were needlessly mean. Now before I get into my reasoning for preferring the organic webbing over the web shooters, I do want to acknowledge that I understand the benefits of web shooters. Peter creating the web shooters and the web fluid are meant to show just how smart he really is and bring some elements of his intellect into his crime fighting. And if you ever need to write Peter into a sticky situation or balance a game mechanic, you can always just say, oh no, he's out of web fluid. But here's my issue with the web shooters. Peter gets his powers from a radioactive spider bite. Let's take a look at what powers Peter gets from it. He's got super strength, which is explained as him having the proportional strength of a spider if the spider was Peter-sized, but that doesn't really ever come into play. In practice, it's just super strength. Like, if we threw the proportional weight of a car at a spider, I don't think it'd be able to catch it like Peter does. He's got superhuman reflexes, the Spidey sense, and that's explained as, spiders have all these little hairs on their body that allow them to detect even the smallest changes in the air and give them really good reflexes. But spiders pretty regularly get their asses kicked by amphibians and reptiles, so that spider sense doesn't really help them out too much, and a lot of animals have really good reflexes. One of the coolest scenes of Tom Holland's career as Spider-Man could have been explained by him being bit by a radioactive dog and getting the ability to sense evil like a dog can. Spider-Man's got superhuman agility, which isn't an exclusively spider-themed ability either. A lot of of things can jump really well. And then the last power that he gets from the spider bite is the ability to stick to walls, which, fair enough, that's something that spiders do, but so do a lot of other things. Like every other kind of bug, geckos, squirrels, mountain goats. If you want to theme your entire superhero identity around sticking to walls, you can be the fucking hair in my shower. The point I'm trying to make is that with just the powers that he got from the spider bite alone, he wasn't forced to be Spider-Man specifically. Like, he really went out of his way to fit the spider theme. He creates the web shooters, the web fluid, he puts a spider on his back, puts a spider on his chest, his costume is covered in webs. Like, you're basing your entire superhero aesthetic off of how you got your powers and, like, kind of one power you have, and you're crafting gadgets to fit that aesthetic. Now, if Peter was consistently depicted as like a kid that's a huge nerd for spiders and loves spiders, I'd get that. Or even something like The Amazing Spider-Man, where the spiders were genetically engineered by Peter's parents, so there's kind of a personal connection to spiders. And on top of that, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would fight like a spider and use spider tactics for hunting. The bite very clearly makes him very spider-brained, which I guess you could argue applies to all spider heroes because they all do the weird crawl up the wall, but they don't have to do that either. Peter has shown on several occasions that he can just walk up walls. Like, you have to figure that there's at least a few versions of Peter in the multiverse that got bit by the spider and then didn't go down the spider-themed superhero route. Like a version of Peter that gets the powers and decides to become a monkey-themed superhero, and he builds himself a prehensile mechanical tail that he can use to swing around. Or maybe a version of Peter that immediately builds the web wings, but obviously doesn't make them web wings, and he just becomes like the flying squirrel. But if he just naturally shot web as one of his superpowers, no matter what animal he themes himself afterwards, the word spider is going to wind up in his superhero name. It's like I said earlier, it's a very petty reason. I just think it's weird to have superpowers and base your entire superhero identity off of the one part of your kit that isn't natural. To me, that's kind of like Magneto using his powers of magnetism to craft himself an Iron Man suit and making his whole identity the fact that he has an Iron Man suit. And you know, I can kinda get it with Miles because he's just following in somebody's footsteps. Peter dies and New York needs a new Spider-Man, so Miles steps in to fill that role. But it's even worse with Miles because he has extra powers that, again, are not at all spider-like, and he's still locked into having his identity be based around a gadget he uses. Like, Miles has electricity powers and he can form lightning constructs, and I heard he recently became part vampire. Brother, if you want to be a bug-themed superhero so bad, with the lightning and the vampirism, you should just be the Electic. That's like if Superman did everything that Superman does, but he also threw batarangs, so his whole identity was that he was Batman.
That's really reductive.
And you know what? Superman has super hearing and he can fly, which means that he has more superpowers you can relate to bats than Peter and Miles have that you can relate to spiders. I don't know, man. I'm not saying that characters with superpowers aren't allowed to use gadgets, but to me, Spider-Man's power set just isn't spider enough. Does whatever a spider can, but only after some extensive time in the lab trying out different prototypes, and then you have to develop the web fluid, and then eventually he can do whatever a spider can. But only for a limited time. Eventually he has to go back to the lab and develop more fluid so he can reload and get back to doing whatever a spider can. Just in my opinion, it's a little unfair to say you can do whatever a spider can when you can't do the main thing that they do. Listen, on one hand, I really do appreciate that Peter bases his entire theme around the one thing that he brought to the power set. But on the other hand, it's really hard to argue with the spider Peter talked to in Doctor Strange number 390. Because the spider argues that, you don't really do anything that a spider does. You're really stretching it calling yourself Spider-Man. And Peter ain't even tell that spider that the webs don't actually come out of him. He's really appropriating spider culture for marketing purposes. Again, in my personal opinion, if you're gonna have him go all in on the spider-themed superhero gimmick, you either gotta make him a huge nerd with a hyperfixation on spiders, show that the spider bite makes him into a weird spider freak that blends all of his food so he can drink it like a spider drinks organs, or the easiest option, just have him shoot the webs naturally. Cause let me tell you something, man, if I'm a superhero in New York and I do a team up with Spider-Man, we take down the bad guys, then after the team up we go and get pizza just on something casual, not really meaning nothing by it, not really meaning nothing by it. And during the hangout, I ask him, like, so does it hurt when the web come out? And he responds, oh, actually, the web doesn't come out of me. It's a little gadget I built and put on my wrist. Oh, so do you just really like spiders then? I could take them or leave them. At that point, all I can really say is,
Oh, like, change your fucking name, stupid.